Sometimes the wrong message finds the right person at the exact moment their life is about to fall apart. Ethan Calloway adjusted the cuff of his custom black tuxedo while Manhattan glittered beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows of the bridal suite at the Grand Regency Hotel. 38 floors below, reporters crowded outside velvet ropes while luxury cars lined the curb in an endless stream of flashing headlights and camera flashes. Inside the suite, his best man laughed with two groomsmen near the private bar, while a wedding coordinator rushed through final details with nervous efficiency. Everything about tonight had been planned down to the second. The guest list included senators, CEOs, hedge fund managers, and one former governor. The floral arrangements flown in from Paris had cost more than most people's yearly salary. Every major business publication in New York had already called it the wedding of the year. And yet Ethan couldn't shake the strange pressure building behind his ribs since morning, like his body was warning him about something his mind couldn't see yet. 5 minutes until ceremony photos. The coordinator reminded him with a tense smile before stepping out again. Ethan loosened his tie slightly and reached for the glass of bourbon sitting untouched beside him when his phone buzzed against the marble counter. He barely glanced at it at first, expecting another congratulatory message from a business partner or one more scheduling issue from security downstairs. But then he noticed the attachment. Past due. Infant cardiac surgery balance due immediately. Ethan frowned. A hospital invoice. Sent from an unknown number. His thumb hovered over the screen before opening the message. The PDF loaded slowly. Mount Sinai Children's Hospital. Outstanding balance. $287,432.16. Patient, Lily Bennett. Age, 8 months. Procedure required within 48 hours. Ethan's jaw tightened slightly as he scrolled farther. There was another message underneath the attachment. Please. I know I already asked too much. I just don't know who else to turn to anymore. She's only 8 months old. For a moment, the noise inside the bridal suite disappeared. Completely. Ethan stared at the words while something cold settled into his chest. Across the room, one of the groomsmen was joking loudly about the honeymoon villa in Santorini, but the voices sounded distant now, muffled behind the sudden ringing in Ethan's ears. He checked the number again. Definitely not intended for him. A mistake. Just another desperate stranger who had typed one wrong digit while her world collapsed around her. He should have ignored it. Any reasonable person would have. Yet his eyes kept drifting back to the line beneath the hospital total. She's only 8 months old. Ethan exhaled slowly and zoomed in on the document again. The attached image showed a small hand wrapped in hospital tape beside a tiny pink hospital bracelet. He didn't know why that detail bothered him more than the bill itself. Maybe because it made the situation real. Human. Fragile. His thumb hovered over the lock screen before another message suddenly appeared. I'm sorry. Wrong number. Please ignore. Ethan stared at the apology longer than he should have. Something about it felt painfully familiar. The embarrassment. The desperation hidden beneath forced politeness. Across the suite, his best man Marcus noticed his expression. Everything good? Ethan looked up automatically. Yeah. But the answer felt wrong the second it left his mouth. His phone buzzed again before he could lock it. This time there was no text. Just another image. A blurry hospital photo taken under harsh fluorescent lights. A sleeping baby connected to wires. Tiny oxygen tubes beneath chubby cheeks. One impossibly small fist curled against a faded yellow blanket. Ethan froze. Somewhere in the background of the photo, partially visible near the edge, sat a woman in gray sweatpants asleep in a hospital chair with her head tilted awkwardly against the wall. Her face was mostly hidden beneath loose blonde hair, but exhaustion radiated from the image itself. The timestamp in the corner read 2:14 a.m. Ethan swallowed once. Hard. Mr. Calloway, the wedding coordinator called carefully from the doorway. They're ready downstairs. Ethan didn't answer immediately. His eyes stayed locked on the photo while. A strange feeling crept through him, sharp and unfamiliar, as if tonight's perfect life had suddenly developed a crack straight down the center. Then another message appeared on his screen. Please don't block this number yet. I'm trying to save my daughter. The ballroom downstairs shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers and thousands of white roses, while a string quartet played softly near the marble staircase. But 38 floors above it all, Ethan Calloway remained frozen beside the window with his phone still glowing in his hand. The city stretched endlessly outside the glass, cold and silver beneath the November rain, yet his attention stayed trapped inside a blurry hospital photo sent by a stranger who thought she had texted someone else. Ethan. Marcus stepped closer this time, lowering his voice. Everyone is waiting. Ethan blinked once before locking the screen. I will be down in a minute. Marcus studied him carefully. You look pale. Just a headache. It was the easiest lie available. Marcus nodded slowly, unconvinced, before leaving the suite with the others. The moment the door shut, silence flooded the room again. Ethan looked back at the phone almost immediately. Another message sat unread beneath the last one. I understand if you cannot help. I just panicked. Ethan exhaled sharply through his nose. Rationally, none of this should matter to him. He did not know this woman. He had never heard of Lily Bennett. Somewhere in New York, thousands of struggling parents were probably sitting in hospital corridors tonight, praying for miracles they could not afford. Yet something about this felt impossible to ignore. His thumb moved before he fully decided to respond. What happened to your daughter? The typing bubble appeared almost instantly, then disappeared. Reappeared. Stopped again. Finally, the answer came through. Congenital heart defect. She needs surgery. Ethan stared at the words while tension slowly tightened across his shoulders. He moved toward the minibar, but stopped before pouring another drink. Suddenly, alcohol felt inappropriate somehow. Too detached for whatever this conversation had become. Another message appeared. I am sorry. You should not have to hear any of this on your wedding day. Ethan frowned immediately. How did she know that? Then he remembered the dozens of articles online this week. Every business magazine had covered the wedding. His name had been everywhere. He typed carefully this time. You know who I am. A long pause followed. Longer than before. Then, I did not at first. I searched the number after the money request failed to send. Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. Failed to send? He reopened the first screenshot attached to the hospital invoice and noticed the red notification at the top he had missed earlier. Payment request declined. So whoever she intended to contact had already refused her. Something about that realization landed heavily in his chest. He imagined her sitting alone beneath fluorescent hospital lights, staring at her phone after another rejection, while her baby slept behind ICU glass. Another message arrived before he could answer. Please do not worry. I will figure something out somehow. People always say that right before they fall apart. Ethan thought quietly. He rubbed a hand across his jaw and walked toward the mirror where his reflection stared back at him in a perfectly tailored tuxedo worth nearly $15,000. Outside the suite, muffled applause echoed faintly from downstairs as another guest arrived. Tonight was supposed to be the beginning of a flawless future. Beautiful wife. Political connections. Expanded business alliances. Every piece carefully arranged exactly where it belonged. Yet suddenly all he could picture was a tired blonde woman asleep in a hospital chair while her daughter fought to breathe. His phone vibrated again. This time the image was clearer. A close-up of the baby's face. Lily's tiny cheeks looked pale against the blanket while medical tape rested near her nose. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Bright blue even beneath exhaustion. Strangely familiar blue. Ethan stared longer than he intended. Then his gaze shifted toward the edge of the image where part of the mother's wrist was visible beside the crib railing. Thin silver bracelet. Small crescent moon charm. Something flickered unexpectedly in the back of his memory. Rain. A woman kneeling beside him on wet pavement. Blonde hair stuck to her cheeks. A trembling voice saying, "Stay awake. Ambulance is coming." Ethan's heartbeat slowed abruptly. No. Impossible. Before he could pull the memory together completely, another text arrived. The hospital said they may transfer Lily if I cannot pay by Friday. I do not think she is strong enough for that. Ethan swallowed hard. Downstairs, the wedding march had started playing softly through hidden ballroom speakers. The music downstairs swelled softly through hidden speakers as guests filled the candlelit ballroom beneath towering arrangements of white orchids and roses. But Ethan remained motionless near the darkened window of the bridal suite, while rain streaked across the Manhattan skyline behind him. His phone stayed clenched in his hand, so tightly his knuckles had begun turning pale. Somewhere below, hundreds of people were waiting for him to walk toward a future everyone had already decided made perfect sense. Yet all he could think about was a hospital room 40 blocks away and a baby struggling to survive, while her exhausted mother apologized to strangers for asking for help. Another knock sounded at the suite door before it opened slowly. This time it was Victoria. Ethan looked up immediately. Even after 3 years together, she still knew how to command a room without raising her voice. Her silk ivory gown shimmered beneath the soft lights while diamonds sparkled against her throat. Elegant, controlled, untouchable. Future senator's daughter. Future Mrs. Ethan Calloway. There you are, she said gently, stepping inside. Everyone is starting to panic downstairs. Ethan forced a faint smile. Just needed a minute. Victoria studied him carefully. You have been distant all day. She moved closer until her hand rested lightly against his chest. Cold feet. Normally, he would have laughed that question away. Tonight he could not. Her eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. What is wrong? Ethan hesitated. He had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions without blinking, but suddenly he could not figure out how to explain why a random hospital bill had cracked open. Something unsettled inside him. Nothing important, he answered finally. Victoria's gaze drifted downward toward the phone in his hand. Then why do you look like someone just told you the world ended? Before Ethan could answer, his screen lit up again. Victoria noticed instinctively. So did he. The room fell strangely still. Ethan looked down first. New message from unknown number. He should have ignored it. Instead, he opened it immediately. Her fever is getting worse. They are trying another medication tonight. Victoria watched his expression shift. Who is that? Ethan swallowed once before locking the screen. A wrong number. A wrong number? She repeated slowly. That has held your attention for almost 20 minutes. Ethan exhaled carefully. Someone accidentally sent me a hospital invoice. Victoria blinked in disbelief. And you are emotionally invested because of that. Her tone remained calm, but he heard the edge beneath it now. Ethan walked toward the minibar, needing movement more than alcohol. It is a baby. Victoria folded her arms lightly. Ethan, there are thousands of sick children in New York. I know. Then what exactly is this? He opened his mouth, but no answer came immediately. Because the truth sounded irrational even inside his own head. Because he still could not explain why the bracelet in that photograph looked familiar. Why the woman's name kept pulling at the back of his memory. Why the child's eyes had unsettled him so deeply. Victoria stepped closer again, lowering her voice. You cannot disappear emotionally 5 minutes before our wedding over some stranger's text message. Ethan rubbed a hand across his jaw. I said I am fine. No, she replied softly. You are distracted. Silence stretched between them. Somewhere downstairs, applause erupted as another important guest entered the ballroom. Victoria glanced toward the door before looking back at him carefully. My father already has reporters waiting outside for photos after the ceremony. Half the board members from Calloway Development are downstairs. If something feels wrong, tell me now before we walk out there. Ethan looked at her for several long seconds. Beautiful, intelligent, perfectly composed beneath pressure. Any man in New York would have considered himself lucky to marry her. Maybe he should have felt more certain standing here tonight. Instead, all he could hear was a stranger typing desperate messages from a hospital hallway. His phone buzzed again. This time Victoria saw the screen light up before he could hide it. A new image appeared automatically in the notification preview. Tiny hospital wrist. Oxygen monitor. The baby asleep beneath pale blue blankets. Victoria's expression changed instantly. Who is sending you baby pictures? Ethan looked down sharply. His pulse slowed the second he saw the image. Because this time the mother's face was visible clearly in the reflection of the ICU window beside the crib. Blonde hair, gray eyes, crescent moon bracelet. And suddenly the fragmented memory in his mind snapped violently into place. 8 months earlier, Boston, rain pouring across an empty street near midnight. His overturned car against a guardrail after swerving to avoid black ice. A terrified woman kneeling beside him while blood dripped down the side of his face. Gray eyes filled with panic. Stay with me, she had whispered while holding pressure against his shoulder. Ethan's breathing stopped for one impossible second. Sophia Bennett. For a few seconds, Ethan forgot entirely that he was standing inside a luxury bridal suite, wearing a tuxedo tailored for the most photographed wedding in Manhattan. The city vanished. The music downstairs vanished. Even Victoria's presence faded into the background, while one memory replayed with startling clarity inside his head. 8 months earlier, Freezing rain had hammered against the windshield of his rental car outside Boston after a late investor meeting ran hours past midnight. He remembered slick roads reflecting white headlights, the sudden shape of a truck drifting too close, the violent turn of the steering wheel. Then silence. Not complete silence. Rain, ringing ears, the smell of smoke, and a woman's terrified voice somewhere nearby. Ethan had drifted in and out of consciousness while emergency lights flashed through the storm, but he remembered. Fragments of her clearly now. Blonde hair, soaked from rainwater. Gray eyes wide with panic. Her shaking hands pressing against his shoulder while she kept whispering, "Stay awake. Please stay awake." He had tried asking her name that night. She never answered. By the time paramedics loaded him into the ambulance, she had disappeared back into the storm before anyone could stop her. Ethan had spent weeks afterward trying to identify the woman who saved his life. His security team searched traffic cameras, hospital reports, police records. Nothing. She had vanished completely. Until now. "Ethan." Victoria's voice cut sharply through the silence. He looked up slowly. Her expression had changed from concern to suspicion. "Who is Sophia Bennett?" Ethan stared at her without answering immediately, because hearing Sophia's name spoken out loud somehow made this situation feel dangerously real. Victoria crossed her arms tightly. "You have been standing here staring at baby pictures for 10 minutes while guests are waiting downstairs." Her voice remained controlled, but tension now threaded beneath every word. "I deserve an explanation." Ethan glanced down at the latest photo again. Lily's tiny hand rested against the hospital blanket, while monitors glowed softly beside her crib. Suddenly the idea of returning downstairs to smile for cameras felt almost surreal. "She helped me once," he said quietly. Victoria blinked. "Helped you? Months ago. And now she is sending you hospital bills." Ethan rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. "It was an accident. She meant to send them to someone else." Victoria gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "You are emotionally unraveling over a wrong number." Ethan did not answer, because deep down, he knew it was no longer about the wrong number. It was the timing, the memory, the child, the strange, impossible feeling twisting through his chest every time he looked at that baby's eyes. Victoria stepped closer again, lowering her voice carefully. "Tell me honestly, did something happen between you and this woman?" Ethan looked at her directly. "No." The answer came immediately because it was true. There had been no affair, no relationship. Just one stormy night and a stranger who refused to leave him bleeding beside a wrecked car. Yet somehow that made this feel even stranger. His phone buzzed again before Victoria could respond. Ethan glanced down automatically. New message. They moved Lily back onto oxygen support. "I think she is scared because she keeps crying every time they touch her." Ethan's chest tightened painfully. Another message followed almost instantly. "I am sorry. I should stop bothering you now." Victoria watched him read every word. "You are still answering her?" Ethan exhaled slowly. "I have not answered in several minutes." "That is not what I asked." Silence stretched between them. Outside the suite, footsteps hurried through the hallway, while distant music floated upward from the ballroom below. Victoria stared at him for several long seconds before speaking again. "My father already warned me about this." Ethan frowned slightly. "Warned you about what?" "That eventually you would get bored with stability." Her voice softened now, almost sad. "You thrive on chaos, Ethan. Big risks. Big emotions. You always have." Ethan shook his head immediately. "This is not that." "Then what is it?" He opened his mouth, but stopped, because he still could not explain why this felt important enough to shake him. Victoria looked toward the glowing phone in his hand one final time before stepping back slowly. "The ceremony starts in 4 minutes." Her eyes held his carefully. "Decide where your attention belongs before you walk downstairs." Then she turned and left the suite without another word. Ethan remained alone beside the window while Manhattan glittered beneath the rain outside. His heartbeat echoed strangely in the silence. Slowly, he unlocked his phone again and opened Sophia's contact thread. For several seconds, he simply stared at the blinking cursor beneath her last message. Then finally, before he could second-guess himself, he typed one sentence. "Which hospital room is Lily in?" The ballroom doors opened slowly as hundreds of guests rose from their seats beneath golden candlelight and towering white floral arrangements, while a string orchestra transitioned into the wedding. Processional with elegant precision. Camera flashes burst softly near the back of the room where reporters had been granted limited access for photographs. Politicians mingled beside billionaire investors. Socialites whispered behind champagne glasses. Every detail had been designed to look flawless. Yet as Ethan Calloway stepped into the ballroom beside his best man, his attention remained fixed entirely on the phone hidden inside his jacket pocket. The applause around him sounded distant, almost underwater. Across the aisle, Victoria stood at the altar beneath a canopy of white roses while her father adjusted his cufflinks proudly beside her. She looked stunning beneath the cathedral lights, poised and regal, like a woman born for moments exactly like this. Guests smiled warmly as Ethan approached the front of the ballroom, but his chest felt strangely hollow with every step forward. His phone vibrated once against his ribs. Ethan ignored it at first. He tried focusing on the ceremony instead. The officiant began speaking smoothly about love, partnership, legacy. Ethan barely heard a single word. All he could picture was Sophia asleep beside an ICU crib after days without rest. Lily crying beneath oxygen tubes. 48 hours before treatment stopped. "You may now share your vows," the officiant announced gently. Victoria looked up at Ethan with controlled calm, though concern still lingered behind her eyes from their conversation upstairs. She reached for his hands. "Ethan," she began softly, her voice echoing through hidden speakers. "When I met you 3 years ago, everyone warned me that powerful men do not slow down long enough to build a real life with someone. But you proved them wrong." Guests smiled warmly. Several women near the front dabbed at their eyes. Ethan tried listening. He truly did. But then his phone vibrated again. Stronger this time. Longer. His pulse immediately tightened. Victoria noticed the shift in his expression before he even moved. Her voice faltered slightly. Ethan slowly reached inside his jacket while confusion spread quietly among the nearest guests. The officiant paused politely. Ethan looked down at the screen. "New. Message from Sophia. They just called a code blue. I am so scared." For one terrifying second, the ballroom disappeared entirely. Ethan's breathing stopped cold while the words blurred slightly on the screen. Code blue. Even without medical training, he knew enough to understand what that meant. His eyes lifted automatically toward Victoria, standing inches away from him in her wedding gown. Beautiful, patient, waiting. But suddenly another image crashed into his mind instead. Tiny blue eyes beneath hospital lights. A frightened mother apologizing for asking for help. Rain pouring across a dark Boston highway while a stranger refused to leave him alone beside a wrecked car. Ethan looked back down at the message again. Then another one appeared beneath it. "They are taking her into emergency stabilization now. I do not think she can breathe on her own anymore." Somewhere near the front row, a guest whispered softly in confusion. Cameras continued flashing. Victoria stared directly at Ethan now, understanding dawning slowly across her face. "What happened?" she asked quietly, careful not to let panic enter her voice. Ethan swallowed hard. "A baby is dying." The ballroom fell strangely silent. Victoria blinked once. "What?" Ethan looked at her helplessly, as though he himself no longer understood how any of this had happened. "The woman from the hospital," he said softly. "Her daughter crashed." Victoria's expression hardened instantly. "Ethan, I know how this sounds. Then tell me you are not thinking about leaving right now." Ethan looked toward the massive ballroom, filled with people waiting for him to continue the ceremony. Business partners, reporters, friends, family. Every part of his carefully constructed life stood inside this room. But somewhere across Manhattan, a terrified woman sat outside an ICU, praying her child survived the night. His heartbeat pounded harder with every passing second. Victoria stepped closer, lowering her voice. "You do not even know these people." Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. "I know her. From one night months ago. She saved my life." Victoria froze. Ethan finally said the words out loud for the first time. "The woman. Texting me. She is the one who pulled me from the car accident in Boston." Shock flickered across Victoria's face. She had heard about the accident. The mysterious woman who vanished before police arrived. Ethan had spent months trying to find her. "Ethan," Victoria whispered carefully. "That does not mean you owe her this." Another vibration hit his phone. Ethan looked down immediately. "Please. She keeps asking for her mommy, but they will not let me back into the room yet." His chest clenched painfully. Before logic could catch up, His body had already made the decision for him. Ethan slowly removed the wedding ring from his pocket. Gasps rippled quietly through the ballroom as he placed it into Victoria's trembling hand. Her face went pale instantly. "I am sorry," he whispered. Then, before anyone could stop him, Ethan Calloway turned away from the altar and walked out of the ballroom, while stunned silence followed behind him like a wave. Rain hammered against the windshield of Ethan Calloway's black Mercedes as Manhattan blurred into streaks of silver and red beyond the speeding traffic. His phone sat mounted beside the dashboard with Sophia's last messages still glowing on the screen, while the windshield wipers fought desperately against the storm outside. He had left behind a ballroom full of stunned silence, millions of dollars in wedding arrangements, and the carefully controlled future everyone expected him to choose. Yet for the first time in years, Ethan felt frighteningly certain about exactly where he needed to be. His security team had called 3 times already. Marcus had called 6. Victoria once. Ethan ignored every single one. Another message appeared from Sophia while he sped through a yellow light near Lexington Avenue. "They still will not let me see her." Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He typed quickly at the next red light. "I am almost there." The typing bubble appeared immediately afterward. "You should not come." Ethan stared at the message while rainwater raced down the glass around him. Then another text followed. "Your wedding." Ethan looked away from the screen briefly, jaw tightening. His wedding already felt like something that belonged to another life entirely. He typed only 4 words back. "Tell me her room." A long pause followed. Then finally, "Pediatric ICU. Room 814. Mount Sinai Children's Hospital." Ethan accelerated the second the light turned green. 23 minutes later, he pushed through the sliding hospital doors still wearing his tuxedo beneath a dark wool coat, while exhausted nurses glanced up from reception in confusion. Rainwater dripped from his sleeves onto the polished floor as he crossed the lobby quickly. The television mounted near the waiting area was already replaying blurry footage from the ballroom. Reports of billionaire CEO leaving ceremony before vows. Ethan barely noticed. "Sir?" The receptionist called after him nervously. "You need authorization for the ICU floor." Ethan reached into his jacket, removed his Black American Express card and business credentials, then placed both calmly on the counter. "Call whoever you need to call," he said quietly. "But I am going upstairs." Something in his expression made the receptionist immediately pick up the phone without another question. The elevator ride felt endless. Ethan watched the floor numbers climb while his heartbeat echoed heavily inside the quiet elevator. When the doors finally opened onto the pediatric ICU floor, the smell of antiseptic and exhaustion hit him immediately. Soft monitor beeps echoed through dim hallways while tired parents sat curled beneath blankets in waiting chairs along the walls. Ethan scanned the hallway once before he saw her. Sophia Bennett sat alone near the far corner beneath fluorescent lights wearing gray sweatpants and an oversized sweatshirt several sizes too big. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy knot that had half fallen apart, and dark circles shadowed her exhausted gray eyes. She looked thinner than he remembered from Boston, more fragile somehow. Yet the second she looked up and saw him standing there in a tuxedo at nearly midnight, every bit of color drained from her face. Ethan stopped walking for one stunned second as their eyes locked across the hallway. Neither of them spoke at first. Sophia rose slowly from the plastic chair, confusion and disbelief flickering across her exhausted features. "Ethan," she whispered. Hearing his name in her voice sent a strange heaviness through his chest. Up close now, he could see how badly she had been holding herself together. Tear stains marked her cheeks. One sleeve of her sweatshirt was damp, where she had clearly wiped her eyes repeatedly. "You came," she said softly, almost like she still could not believe it. Ethan glanced instinctively toward the ICU doors behind her. "How is she?" Sophia's lips trembled slightly before she answered. They stabilized her breathing for now. Her voice cracked gently on the last word. But they said her oxygen levels dropped too fast tonight. Ethan exhaled slowly, tension easing from his shoulders for the first time all evening. Sophia stared at him again, finally noticing the tuxedo clearly beneath his coat. Realization spread across her face in visible horror. "Oh my God." She stepped backward immediately. "Your wedding." Ethan said nothing. Sophia covered her mouth with shaking fingers. No, you were not supposed to actually come here." "Sophia, I did not know it was your number." She rushed out quickly. I swear I did not mean to ruin anything. I was trying to send the bill to my cousin Michael because he said he might help me borrow some money, and I typed one number wrong, and then suddenly, her voice broke completely. Ethan moved closer instinctively. You did not ruin anything. Sophia shook her head rapidly, panic building behind her exhausted eyes. The news is probably everywhere already. Ethan glanced briefly toward the muted television mounted above the nurse's station, where footage from the abandoned ballroom flashed across the screen. Reporters crowded outside the Grand Regency, while headlines scrolled beneath them. Sophia followed his gaze and looked physically sick. Ethan, he looked back at her calmly. Where is Lily? Sophia swallowed hard before slowly pointing toward the ICU doors. Second room on the left. Ethan nodded once and started walking immediately, but before he reached the doors, Sophia grabbed his sleeve gently. Her fingers trembled against the fabric. Why are you really here? Ethan looked down at her hand, gripping the black fabric of his tuxedo, then back into the exhausted gray eyes he had not seen since a stormy night outside Boston. Because 8 months ago, he said quietly, you stayed when everyone else would have left. Ethan pushed through the ICU doors slowly while the steady rhythm of heart monitors echoed through the dim hallway beyond the glass. The pediatric intensive care unit was quieter than the rest of the hospital, almost unnaturally calm beneath soft fluorescent lights and the constant hum of medical equipment. Nurses moved carefully between rooms while exhausted parents sat curled beneath thin blankets beside sleeping children. Ethan had closed billion-dollar deals in silent boardrooms without flinching once. Yet somehow walking toward room 814 felt heavier than anything he had faced in years. Sophia remained near the hallway entrance watching him nervously, her arms wrapped tightly around herself as though she still expected him to disappear at any second. Ethan stopped outside the second room on the left and looked through the glass window first. The sight inside hit him harder than he expected. Lily Bennett looked impossibly small beneath pale blue hospital blankets while machines blinked softly around her crib. Tiny oxygen tubes rested beneath her nose, and one little hand curled weakly against a stuffed rabbit beside her pillow. Her blonde hair was barely visible beneath the hospital cap, but her eyes were open now. Bright blue, the exact same shade that had unsettled him since the first photograph. Ethan stepped inside slowly. A nurse standing near the monitors glanced up automatically before recognition flashed across her face. She had clearly seen the news already. Sir, she said carefully, lowering her voice. Family only in this room. Ethan looked toward Lily again before answering quietly. I know. The nurse hesitated uncertainly, glancing between his tuxedo and the sleeping child. Before she could speak again, Lily turned her head weakly toward the sound of voices. Her tiny fingers moved against the blanket while her blue eyes blinked slowly beneath exhaustion. Ethan felt something tighten, painfully in his chest. Children had never affected him this way before. He had spent most of his adult life buried beneath schedules, acquisitions, investor meetings, and expansion plans. His world operated through logic, leverage, and control. Yet standing beside this hospital crib, none of those things seemed to matter at all. She has been asking for her mommy every few minutes, the nurse explained softly. Her fever finally started dropping after stabilization. Ethan nodded quietly, unable to look away from the child. Lily stared back at him with sleepy confusion while the oxygen monitor beeped steadily beside her bed. Then, unexpectedly, her tiny hand reached weakly toward him through the crib railing. Ethan froze for half a second before instinctively stepping closer. He carefully offered one finger, and Lily wrapped her tiny hand around it immediately. The movement was so small it should not have mattered, but somehow it shattered the last layer of emotional distance he had left. Behind him, Sophia covered her mouth quietly from the doorway. Ethan looked up toward the nurse after several silent seconds. What exactly does she need? The nurse exhaled carefully. Corrective surgery for the valve defect. The doctors want to operate as soon as possible, but administration flagged the insurance issues yesterday. Sophia lowered her eyes immediately, shame flickering across her exhausted face. I lost my coverage after maternity leave, she admitted softly from the doorway. Then I lost my apartment trying to keep up with treatment costs. Ethan looked at her sharply. You lost your apartment? Sophia nodded once, embarrassed. 2 weeks ago. Silence filled the room except for the steady monitor beeps around Lily's crib. Ethan stared at Sophia, now with growing disbelief. Why did you never contact me after Boston? Sophia looked startled by the question. Why would I? Ethan frowned slightly. You saved my life. Sophia gave a tired, sad smile. And then you disappeared into a private hospital surrounded by security guards and executives. Men like you do not usually expect strangers to call afterward. Ethan had no answer to that. Because she was probably right. The nurse adjusted one of Lily's monitors gently before speaking again. The billing department has been pressuring Dr. Kaplan all week because of the balance. Ethan's expression hardened instantly. How much? Sophia spoke quietly before the nurse could answer. Please do not. Ethan looked at her directly. How much? Almost 300,000. Ethan barely reacted. To him, the amount was insignificant. Yet looking at Sophia now, he realized that number had probably felt impossible to survive. Suddenly the exhaustion in her face made more sense. The panic, the desperate messages, the apology after every sentence. Ethan reached into his jacket slowly and removed his phone. Call whoever handles pediatric billing tonight, he told the nurse calmly. Sophia's eyes widened immediately. Ethan, no child should have to wait for treatment because of money. His voice remained quiet, but something inside it made both women fall silent. The nurse hesitated only briefly before nodding quickly and leaving the room. Sophia stared at him in stunned disbelief while rain continued tapping softly against the hospital windows behind them. You cannot just walk into a hospital and solve everything, she whispered shakily. Ethan looked down at Lily, still holding his finger weakly against the blanket. Then back at Sophia. Watch me. Within 20 minutes, the atmosphere inside the pediatric ICU floor shifted completely. Hospital administrators who had ignored Sophia's emails for weeks suddenly appeared in press suits carrying tablets and folders, while nurses moved more quickly through the hallways whispering updates into phones. Ethan stood near the ICU window with one hand inside his coat pocket while watching Lily sleep beneath soft monitor lights, his expression calm but unreadable. The tuxedo still made him look wildly out of place among exhausted parents and fluorescent hospital walls. Yet somehow no one questioned his presence anymore. Money and power changed how rooms behaved around a person. Sophia noticed it too. A middle-aged administrator approached, carefully holding a digital file against his chest. Mr. Calloway, he said nervously, we have already notified pediatric surgery that the balance issue has been resolved. Sophia looked up instantly. Resolved? Ethan never took his eyes off Lily. Schedule whatever treatment she needs. The administrator nodded quickly. Dr. Kaplan is reviewing operating room availability now. Tonight, Ethan replied calmly. If medically possible. The administrator hesitated only briefly. Of course. Sophia stared at Ethan in disbelief while the man hurried away again. You paid all of it? She whispered. Ethan finally looked toward her. No child should have her future decided by billing departments. Sophia shook her head slowly as though trying to process what was happening. That was almost $300,000. Ethan's expression softened slightly. And you still would have sold everything you own trying to save her. Sophia lowered her eyes immediately because they both knew it was true. Silence settled briefly between them while rain continued tapping softly against the windows outside. Then Ethan's phone began vibrating nonstop inside his jacket. This time he finally pulled it out. 43 missed calls. Hundreds of messages. News alerts exploding across every major outlet. Billionaire CEO abandons wedding mid-ceremony. Socialite bride left at altar. Calloway family in crisis. Ethan barely reacted until another headline appeared beneath the others. Mystery woman identified? Sophia noticed the screen immediately and went pale. Oh no. Ethan opened the article quickly. Grainy paparazzi photos already filled the screen. Him entering Mount Sinai in his tuxedo. Sophia visible behind the ICU doors. Headlines twisted the situation instantly into scandal. Secret affair. Hidden child. Runaway groom. Sophia stepped backward slowly like someone physically struck. This is bad. Ethan locked the screen again. Ignore it. I cannot ignore this. Her voice trembled now. Your entire life just exploded because of me. Ethan looked at her directly. No. Because I made a choice. Sophia wrapped her arms around herself tightly while anxiety flooded across her exhausted face. You do not understand how people like me get treated in stories like this. Ethan frowned slightly. People like you? Poor women standing next to rich men. Her laugh sounded painfully tired. The internet already decided I trapped you before they even know my name. Ethan started to answer, but another voice interrupted sharply from behind them. There she is. Both turned immediately. Victoria stood near the hallway entrance, still wearing her wedding gown beneath a long black coat, while two security personnel lingered several feet behind her. Her makeup remained flawless despite the chaos exploding around her, but her eyes looked colder than Ethan had ever seen them. Sophia's face drained of color instantly. I should go. No, Ethan said quietly. Victoria approached slowly across the hallway floor, her heels clicking softly beneath the fluorescent lights. Several nurses pretended not to watch while clearly listening to every word. Victoria stopped directly in front of Ethan first. The entire press corps is outside the hospital. Her voice remained controlled, almost dangerously calm. My father has spent the last hour answering questions from senators and reporters while your board members panic about investor reactions. Ethan held her gaze evenly. I know. Victoria glanced toward Sophia next. Her expression sharpened instantly. And this is the woman worth destroying everything for. Sophia immediately shook her head. I never asked him to come here. No, Victoria replied quietly. You just happened to text my fiancé baby pictures during our wedding ceremony. Shame flooded across Sophia's face immediately. I said it was an accident. Victoria's eyes drifted briefly toward the ICU room where Lily slept behind glass. Something unreadable flickered across her expression before she looked back at Ethan. Tell me the truth right now, she said softly. Is that child yours? The hallway fell completely silent. Even the nurses stopped moving. Sophia looked stunned by the question while Ethan's jaw tightened slightly. Because despite everything that had happened tonight, he still did not know the answer himself. Victoria studied his silence carefully and slowly realized that uncertainty already existed in his mind too. Her expression changed instantly. Hurt, betrayal, fear. Oh my God, she whispered. Ethan finally spoke quietly. I do not know. Sophia's eyes widened in shock. Ethan, but before anyone could say another word, alarms suddenly sounded sharply from inside Lily's ICU room while nurses rushed toward the door all at once. The sharp alarms from Lily's ICU room cut through the hallway instantly as nurses rushed past Ethan, Sophia, and Victoria with urgent focus while monitors beeped rapidly behind the glass. Sophia's face turned white with panic. Lily, she whispered before instinctively trying to move toward the room, but a nurse gently stopped her near the doorway. Please wait here. Sophia's hands began trembling violently. Ethan stepped beside her immediately, while Victoria remained frozen several feet away, watching the scene unfold with stunned disbelief beneath the harsh fluorescent lights. Through the ICU window, doctors surrounded Lily's crib while machines flashed rapidly around her tiny body. Sophia pressed both hands against her mouth as tears spilled down her cheeks uncontrollably. No, no, no. Ethan looked toward the room, jaw tight with helpless tension. For the first time in years, money meant absolutely nothing. Influence meant nothing. Control meant nothing. All he could do was stand there while a frightened mother silently fell apart beside him. Sophia suddenly swayed slightly from exhaustion and panic. Ethan caught her arm immediately before she lost balance completely. She looked up at him with devastated gray eyes. I cannot lose her. The words shattered something deep inside his chest. Ethan tightened his hold on her arm gently. You are not going to. Sophia shook her head desperately. You do not know that. Ethan looked back through the ICU glass, where doctors continued moving around Lily's bed. Then I will stay until we do. Sophia stared at him silently while tears continued sliding down her face. Across the hallway, Victoria watched the interaction quietly. Something inside her expression changed slowly. Not forgiveness. Not acceptance. Just the painful realization that Ethan had already emotionally crossed a line he could never fully uncross. A doctor finally stepped out of the ICU room several minutes later, pulling down his surgical mask with visible exhaustion. Sophia rushed toward him instantly. Doctor. Dr. Kaplan exhaled carefully. Her oxygen levels dropped suddenly again, but we stabilized her. Sophia nearly collapsed in relief. Ethan steadied her beside him while the doctor continued speaking. I do not want to risk another episode tonight. We need to move forward with surgery immediately. Sophia nodded rapidly through tears. Whatever she needs. The doctor glanced down at the tablet in his hands. There are authorization forms that need signatures before we prep the operating room. Sophia immediately reached for the clipboard, but her hands were shaking too badly to hold the pen steadily. Ethan quietly took the clipboard from her before she dropped it. Dr. Kaplan looked between them briefly. Legally, we need a parent or authorized guardian signature for emergency authorization. Silence settled heavily across the hallway. Sophia lowered her eyes immediately. Her father is not involved. The doctor hesitated carefully. Then only you can sign. Sophia tried again, but her trembling hands still could not steady enough to write properly. Ethan watched her struggle for several painful seconds before gently taking the pen from her fingers. Sophia, he said softly. She looked up at him helplessly. I cannot even think straight right now. Ethan looked toward the paperwork briefly, then back at her exhausted, tear-filled eyes. Let me help you. Dr. Kaplan glanced carefully between them once more. If you want him listed temporarily as authorized support for medical coordination, you can add his name here. Sophia froze completely. So did Victoria across the hallway. Ethan said nothing. He simply waited. Sophia stared down at the paperwork while emotions flickered rapidly across her exhausted face. Fear, shame, confusion, trust. Finally, after several long seconds, she slowly nodded once. Ethan took the clipboard carefully and signed beside her name while hospital staff immediately began preparing operating room clearance. Victoria watched the signature silently from across the hall. The sight seemed to settle something final inside her expression. She stepped forward slowly until she stood directly beside Ethan one last time. I think this is the first honest decision you have made in a very long time, she said quietly. Ethan looked at her with visible regret. Victoria, she shook her head gently before he could continue. Do not apologize for choosing something real. Her eyes drifted briefly toward Sophia and then toward the ICU room beyond the glass. Just make sure she was worth burning your old life down for. Then Victoria turned and walked slowly down the hallway without looking back again. Ethan watched her disappear around the corner before lowering his eyes toward the paperwork still resting in his hands. One final page remained partially visible beneath the authorization forms. Lab request, paternity DNA panel. Ethan stared at the paper for several silent seconds while Sophia noticed it too. Her breathing caught instantly. Neither of them moved. Dr. Kaplan glanced toward the form naturally. We can process that tonight as well if requested. Silence filled the hallway again except for the distant sound of rain against the hospital windows. Ethan slowly picked up the unopened DNA request form and looked at Sophia carefully. Her gray eyes filled with fear immediately. Not because she knew the answer, but because she clearly did not. Ethan folded the form once and slipped it quietly into his coat pocket. Not tonight, he said softly. Then he looked through the ICU glass where Lily slept beneath soft monitor lights waiting for surgery, while one impossible question continued echoing silently between them both.